Hi, I'm making this brief video just as a micro-lecture for Chapter 5, which covers managing the business. We'll talk about some of the learning objectives you have for the for the chapter. And I'll also go over some of the topics that I think sometimes students have found a little confusing, and hopefully I can add a little clarity to those topics. So, when we talk about managing the business, we're talking about sometimes I'll ask a class, what is management? What does it mean? And the most common answer is that it's what the boss does. It's like being the boss. That's what makes me a manager. Well, as you're going to see, that's just one element of it. Management is an entire process as to how you would actually run your organization. So we're going to cover off on some of those things. So the learning objectives are describe the nature of management and identify the 4 basic functions that constitute the management process. We're going to talk about that briefly in this video. Different types of managers that are likely to be found in an organization by level and area. Describe the basic roles and skills required of managers. Explain the importance of strategic management, which we're going to spend a little bit of time on in this video as well. And then we'll talk about contingency planning and the development and importance of corporate culture. Okay. So those 4 pillars of the management process are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. As you can see, it's sort of linear in a way in that you start with a plan, you organize to enact the plan, you make the plan work, and then you measure how well you're doing against the plan. So that's a brief kind of overview of how the management process works. But in fact, it's quite iterative, that as you're doing some element of the management process, you're probably working with or affecting other parts of it as well. So it's not as simple as this chart looks, but those are the 4 elements that go into the management process. And then I'm going to skip right forward to again, everything in the chapter is really important to read. You'll have to know all of it for the purposes of the test, but I'm going to go over some of the key areas. So strategic management is basically the high level of management. And strategic management is, I should say, a strategy as it's defined here in the text, is a broad set of organizational plans for implementing the decisions made for achieving the organizational goals. That sounds good, but really what it is the purpose of your organization and what you're trying to do. And there's several different things that organizations use to do that. And one of them is a mission statement. And a mission statement is the organization's statement of how it will achieve its purpose in the environment in which it conducts its business. That's one way to put it. I actually do this with smaller companies because sometimes they struggle with these types of things. They know what they're doing, they know what they're in business to do, but sometimes it's hard for them to put it into terms. So it's really a question of how you're defining your business. So what do we do? How do we do it? Who do we do it for? Whom, I should say. What value are we bringing to those people? And where are we going? So it's really important not to be too broad in your definition, because a lot of times, that would be a temptation as you go through this, but, you want it to be defining. So that's why you want to be as specific as you can without being too specific, right? So here's some examples of mission statements. There's the company called Express Scripts. It's a major pharmaceutical benefits administrator. And they say Express Scripts is a company dedicated to making the use of prescription drugs safer and more affordable for plan sponsors and over 50 million members and their families. So they say what they do, making prescription drugs safer and more affordable. Those are the benefits, that's the value that's brought. And who they do it for, the plan sponsors and over 50 million members in their company. So that's a pretty good one. CVS says, we will be the easiest pharmacy retailer for customers to use. Now, what's interesting about a mission statement, and the reason why you want it to be somewhat defining and specific, is that it also says what you're not. They don't say we will be the cheapest pharmacy retailer for custom use. We will be, I can't think of another one, the most complete, but whatever. The point is that they're saying that they want it to be the easiest. Now, that might affect their business and how they manage their business. They might, for example, keep their pharmacy department open longer than other people would. have more locations, those types of things. So you can see how that you would actually use this. So here's some other ones. So one of them is from Micron, who makes microprocessors. Be the most efficient and innovative global provider of semiconductor solutions. And it kind of says what the value that they're bringing, what they're going to be good at, and they're saying globals because they honestly sell internationally everywhere. And I'm giving this one here. I'm just finding this one interesting because I asked the class who they think this is. That's why I put those X's in there. So at this company, we work to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. This is our mission. Everything we do reflects this mission and the values that make it possible. Give you a minute to think about who you think that whose mission statement that is. And I can tell you it's Microsoft. And that's not a very good mission statement. It doesn't really say what they do. So, and it's not very defining. So, anyway, I mean, Bill Gates might beg to differ with me. He's got a lot of more money than I do, but I don't think that's necessarily a great mission statement. Okay. There's a couple other things we can take a look at in helping this work is settings when we set strategic objectives. Sometimes those are a little bit difficult to do. And this is where you take your mission statement, you basically break it down into manageable outcomes. So, using an example, you would read, if you wanted to be the lowest price choice in your marketplace, you might have a strategic objective of reducing your expenses by 5% don't worry about the dates. I use these things a lot in other, actually in presentations all over. So, you may be, if you want to be the fastest growing, your strategic objective will be opening new locations in 5 key markets by a particular year. If you wanted to be the most highly rated, you might say our objective would be to increase our average online rating from 3.5 stars to 4.5 stars in 2 years. I've actually worked with companies that they have a very similar type of strategic objective. If we want to have the most satisfied customers, we might have a strategic objective of reducing customer service complaints in half by 3 years. And if you want to be the biggest, maybe it's just a question of the objective should be to acquire 3 of your largest competitors in the next 5 years. These are all real things. Companies really do them, and so it gives you an idea. So this is not covered in the text, but I think it's a pretty important concept. It's something called strategic intent, which I think also helps to define your business. So it's defined as a compelling statement about where an organization is going that succinctly conveys a sense of what the organization wants to achieve in the long term. And this is an important part, without regard for current abilities or limitations. Naturally, you might not want to do that. So, that's dreaming, that's, visionary. And that's right, that's exactly what it is, but it gives you a direction. So here are some examples that the authors use. Canon, and think of it back in the little copier days, their goal was to beat Xerox. It was simply stated. Walmart's was to overtake Sears, who was the largest retailer in the United States, and they did do that. The Apollo space program back in the 60s was to beat the Russians to the moon. So these were statements of strategic intent. So they can be very lofty ambitions, maybe even dreams, but they're nonetheless motivating, and they're key to strategic success. So it also creates a cohesiveness of action. So you can imagine what back in the early 1960s, when the Russians were the first ones to put an astronaut into space, I'm sure the people at NASA were like, okay, that's not a good start. We really have to get ourselves pulled together and get ourselves in business here, and get her moving towards our own successes. Okay, so in formulating strategy, you're going to set strategic goals. You're going to analyze the organization. A very commonly used analysis, and it's a fairly simple one to use, although not necessarily all that easy to understand, but it's called SWOT analysis. That's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you want to match the organization to its environment. You have to take an outside view, and that's what SWOT starts to help you to do. Okay? And here's an example of a SWOT chart. So, you think about what the strengths are, and there's some examples. Weaknesses, this is an internal view of your organization. And then When you think about opportunities and threats, that's an external view. So that's where we're doing a matchup of what we are and what we're capable of doing with the actual outcome that we're going to, how we're going to actually go about doing it. So now a lot of times organizations go through a change process for terms like re-engineering, reorganization. There's all kinds of different terms put around that, and I've helped people do this in the past. So how do I manage that kind of change? And these are things that I've done that I think were very successful. Identify specific observable behaviors that are critical to change, going the extra mile for a customer, that kind of thing. Okay, so I point those out if that's what's important in the organization. In person, acknowledge the behavior individually to the person displaying it. It's better if their peers see it. So say, hey, this is the way we want to do it now, and you did an outstanding job of doing that. In a group format, enthusiastically acknowledge the behaviors in front of everybody and repeat it often. Just keep hammering it home. And then you want to track progress and report. Team success is most important. Celebrate the wins when you have them. So those are things I do when instituting change within an organization. Last thing I'm going to show you is a book I strongly recommend you read. It's a great book. It's by Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. It's called Made in America. And I would really, it's a fantastic read when it comes to management. Walmart is a very well-managed organization, and it came a lot from the vision and the founder, Sam Walton. So it's a great book. So if you get a chance to read it, I would absolutely do that. Okay, that wraps up this micro lecture, and good luck with the rest of the chapter.